Hey everyone, God bless you and thank you for tuning in on this Tech Tuesday. Christ is born. I wish you a very joyous third day of Christmas. I hope you're celebrating our Savior's incarnation with vigor. My reflection today I've entitled, Tech is Not Neutral. This is a reflection upon the inherent value-laden nature of all technological development. We're going to comment upon the message of the thing itself, not just the use of the thing. I'd like to begin this reflection by reading to you a passage from a Socratic dialogue. This was written by Plato in the 4th century BC. Probably most scholars think around 370, about the same time that he wrote the Republic. So it's the fruit of his kind of mature writing and reflection. It's a dialogue called Phaedrus. Phaedrus is in the story a friend of Socrates. Socrates in the dialogue is reflecting upon the nature of love, the nature of oratory and rhetoric, and he talks about writing in there, and he tells a story about the meeting between the king of Egypt named Thamus and an Egyptian god, the Egyptian god of writing, the Egyptian god of calculation and arithmetic. His name is Thuth. Theuth. Sometimes it's translated Thoth, comparable to, I think, the Greek god Hermes. So allow me to read just a portion from Plato's dialogue, Phaedrus. Now the king of all Egypt at that time was Thamus, who lived in the great city in the upper region that the Greeks called Egyptian Thebes. Thamus they called Ammon. Thuth came to exhibit his arts to him and urged him to disseminate them to all Egyptians. Thamus asked him about the usefulness of each art, and while Thuth was explaining it, Thamus praised him for whatever he thought was right in his explanation and criticized him for whatever he thought was wrong. The story goes that Thamus said much to Thuth, both for and against each art, which it would take too long to repeat. But when they came to writing, Thuth said this, "O king, here is something that, once learned, will make the Egyptians wiser and will improve their memory. I have discovered a potion for memory and for wisdom." Secret trick to be wise. Thamus, however, replied, "O most expert Thuth, one man can give birth to the elements of an art, but only another can judge how they can benefit or harm those who will use them." Ooh. And now, since you are the father of writing, your affection for it has made you describe its effect as the opposite of what they really are. In fact, it will introduce forgetfulness into the soul of those who learn it. They will not practice using their memory because they will put their trust in writing, which is external and depends on signs that belong to others instead of trying to remember from the inside completely on their own. You have not discovered a potion for remembering, but for reminding. You provide your students with the appearance of wisdom, not with its reality. Your invention will enable them to hear many things without being properly taught, and they will imagine that they have come to know much, while for the most part they will know nothing. And they will be difficult to get along with, since they will merely appear to be wise instead of really being so. Is that not, dear ones, a commentary on our own information age in which the smartphone has made people dumb? Is it not a commentary on the fact that we have greater access to information today and far greater knowledge and perspective? So think with me for a moment about this incredible dialogue and what Socrates is really trying to suggest to us, because I think he has presented to us an incredibly wise evaluation of technological development. And you should know that the word translated here, ars, is the same as technologia. It's the same word that means technology. In this incredible dialogue, I want to point out 4 things to you. First, notice that Plato presents the inventor of a technology, in this case writing, as a god. How perceptive. That is exactly how we treat the inventors of technology today. All the great men of the world, all the richest men of the world are the tech titans. We not only use their inventions and have made them rich in the purchasing of them, but we have done so with very little reflection and great cultural appreciation of them. Today, they are the most popular of people, the people who are interviewed the most, whose word is most influential. We treat them like gods, and that evidently is a very ancient human thing to do. Number two, notice that Socrates presents the nature of technology as inherently biased, that there is no such thing as neutral technology. I hear all the time, and have heard for most of my adult life, an attitude that comes from the falling West about technology, that technology is by definition good, and the new is good, and certainly better. And if we're going to evaluate technology at all, it should be simply on the use of technology. Is it going to be good, used for good, or is it going to be used for bad? But there's no discussion about the fact of the technology itself. Is the very creation of this technology good? Let me give you an example that I think is worthy of contemplation. One of the things that excites the technological world today is the development of human-computer interfaces. And so, for instance, Elon Musk has a company called Neuralink, in which he is hoping to implant, to drill a hole in your skull and to place in there a computer chip that's the size of some 4 or 5 stacked quarters. Then put your skin back and sew it up and have a direct link between yourself and a computer. He sells this, he enthuses people's hearts about this by saying it might be able to help people who are paralyzed due to spinal injuries use their limbs. It might be able to help blind people to be able to see. Now, we're very, very far, and Elon is very, very far, his team is very far from accomplishing that. But notice that he's selling the technology, he's prejudicing the technology in that it could possibly do wonders in some very small select cases. He'll go on to say that the vast majority of the usage won't have anything to do with that at all. The vast majority of the usage will be to enable people to process and think more quickly, to interact with their computers. Now, think about that objectively, not in the usage, not in the particular usage. Well, would this be good if we help people who are paralyzed move? Would this be good if we help people who are blind see? Ask yourself the larger question. Objectively, the idea of implanting a computer chip in the human brain such that there is a direct interface between a person's most intimate thoughts and a computer, does that sound wise? Is it a wise thing to develop a technology that will allow people's intimate thoughts to be hacked? Think about that. This is exactly the kind of question that Plato is trying to get us to posit. What is the value, the meaning of the tech itself, not its usage? Technology, he says, this is my second point, is form. And form itself, regardless of how it's used, has meaning. And that meaning needs to be judged. Long before we ever start using the tech, we should decide if the tech is legitimate itself. Is it wise itself? The real and singular question in technology is not about the use of technology. Because the reality is, often once you make a certain technology, there's no reining in its use. We see this, of course, with nuclear technology, right? Who would have said the ethical thing to do with nuclear technology is not to use it primarily for power, but for destructive weapons, whose use violates every principle of justifiable Christian warfare, treating innocent civilians like combatants and eliminating 60,000 of them instantaneously by the drop of an atomic bomb, and putting the whole world into a condition of paranoia and fear, as in fact we're living in right now, as the Ukraine-Russia war has increased, where we're afraid of unilateral destruction, mutually assured destruction. The very form of technology is under question in Plato's Socratic dialogue called the Phaedrus. Remember, what's being questioned here is not what is being written by the new technology of writing that the god Thuth invented. No, King Thamus says writing itself has a value. Writing itself needs to be evaluated. He says writing is actually going to make people dumber. This was the argument. He's not commenting upon what people will write. Certainly, as a king, he's probably concerned that people will use writing to write anarchical political tracts that might lead to the downfall of King Thammus. Okay, that's bad if you're a king. You don't want that to happen. But that's not what he's saying. He's questioning the idea of writing itself. Point 3. Plato presents all technologies, no matter how advanced, no matter how wonderful, as a trade-off. Did you notice the words that King said? That Socrates describes King Thammus as evaluating the positives and the negatives in every one of the technologies of the god Thuth. There are benefits, but there are losses. So for instance, Google Maps. What is the benefit of Google Maps? The benefit of Google Maps is that you actually have now a means of finding an address that you're not previously familiar with. If it's dark and you can no longer open your Thomas guide and look up the name of the street and look at the maps and make a navigational decision, it will guide you. That's wonderful. The negative is no one knows how to navigate anymore. Men who are the best in navigation even can't do that anymore. We used to pay really close attention to signposts. Oh, the third street that has a stop sign with an X through it. That's where you turn right now. We're oblivious. We're oblivious. We're driving because we're just watching or listening to our Google Maps. All technology is a trade-off. Something is going to be gained, but something also is going to be lost. It's value laden. And this kind of sober approach to technology is exactly what we do not have today. We have, in the words of Neil Postman, that fine New York scholar and author of the blockbuster Technopoly, he says, today our culture is filled with an abundance of zealous, one-eyed Thuths who only see the benefits of technology and have no sobriety to suggest that anything is lost at all in the embrace of a new technology. Now, number 4. Plato asserts that the discoverer of an art is not the one who can determine the good or the harm that will accrue to those who use the art. The last person in the world you want to evaluate the good or negative of the use of a new technology is the creator himself. Obviously, he's put his whole life into this. His financial future is completely dependent upon you embracing with enthusiasm and telling your friends to embrace with enthusiasm their technology. That's why you're never going to hear an Apple CEO come and tell you that the technology that Apple uses in their phones that requires constant updates and forces you to outdate your phone and to throw your phone away so that their business plan can succeed. If you always buying a new iPhone every few years, that there's nothing wrong with that technology and it's just about improving it. This is how such an absolutely grievous technology like that, which is completely at the cost of the customer and completely for the benefit of the company and totally unnecessary in its design, you're never going to hear that from the inventor of the technology itself. This is why King Thammus said, you, Thuth, are the last person that anyone should listen to because you're so attached to your baby that you're only going to tell us what you want us to know. This is, in fact, the case. How have we forgotten this? Is it not ironic that during COVID, the Congress and the Senate both summoned the tech titans who were manipulating the public, aggressively manipulating the public, controlling access to information so that this outcome can take place and this outcome can't, while at the same time claiming to be a neutral public square, to bring in before the Congress Mark Zuckerberg and ask him about the subject of proper privacy laws and proper ethical regulations for technology. This is the practice of intellectual imbeciles. To bring the inventor of a technology to counsel us about how to properly use that technology ethically is exactly what Socrates says you never do. Instead, you bring in someone whose competence you trust, someone whose judgment you trust, a sound moral theologian, an ethicist. They come in, they articulate the classic moral principles that Western society, Christian Western society, has been built upon. And then you measure the technology by those classic principles, and you hold the tech masters accountable to the objective morality. That's how it's done, not vice versa. We don't listen to a lecture about the proper use of a technology by the inventor himself. Tech is not neutral, dear ones. All form has meaning, and form drives function. And if we don't have a little bit of sobriety and back off, which of course requires some slowing down, some distancing, then we won't know what will end up being, because we'll start using technology blindly, as we have, and we'll end up in a horrific situation like we're in. Since 2012, in the last 10 years, since we've become addicted to screens, what has the consequence been? Incredible increase in mental illness, suicide, depression, self-harm, and at its root, an addiction to screens, an intentionally designed addiction to screens. Tech is not neutral. God be with you.